All right, so today we're going to pull back the curtain on something that's, well, it's basically invisible, but it runs our entire world, the global supply chain. We're going to figure out why this amazing system is also, surprisingly, super fragile.
You've been there, right? I mean, we all have. You walk into a store and suddenly the shelves are just empty. Maybe it was the whole toilet paper fiasco a few years back, or maybe it was just your favorite brand of coffee just vanished for weeks. That moment of frustration, that's actually a tiny little clue to a huge global puzzle. It's a sign that somewhere, way down the line, a domino just fell. So, let's get into what that really means.
You know, for the last few decades, the name of the game has been efficiency. Make everything faster, cheaper, and leaner. It's really like this perfectly choreographed global ballet. You've got parts and products zipping across oceans and continents, all designed to show up exactly when they're needed, not a moment sooner, not a moment later.
Okay, but here's the catch. In that relentless race for peak efficiency, we've kind of trimmed all the fat. And I mean all of it. All the backup plans, all the just-in-case stock, it's gone. So the system we built is incredibly fast and sophisticated, yeah, but it's also become really brittle. It just doesn't have much give when things go wrong.
So, how in the world did we get here? Well, it boils down to a few big trends. You've got lean production and just-in-time delivery, which basically means nobody keeps a big warehouse full of extra stuff anymore. Then there's the whole single supplier dependency. It's cheaper, for sure, but as the car industry found out with that massive chip shortage, if that one factory has a problem, your entire production line can just stop. And of course, globalization. It's amazing for cutting costs, but it means there's a huge distance between where something is made and where you buy it, and every mile is another chance for something to go sideways.
So you can see how this all sets the stage for a big problem. When a system is that tightly wound, with zero slack, any little hiccup can set off a chain reaction. It's like a line of dominoes stretching across the globe. So let's look at the kinds of things that can actually knock over that first domino.
Okay, a lot of the biggest threats actually come from outside the company itself. On one hand, you have what's called demand risk. This is all about your customers doing something you didn't see coming, like a product goes viral on social media and suddenly everyone wants one. Then on the other side, you've got supply risk. This is a problem coming from the other direction, upstream. It's when your supplier just can't get you the parts you need to make your stuff in the first place.
And then you have the really big, totally unpredictable stuff. These are called environmental risks. We're talking about external shocks that nobody can really control. Remember when that giant container ship, the Ever Given, got stuck sideways in the Suez Canal? Think about that for a second. One ship in the wrong spot blocked something like 10% of all global trade. That's a perfect example of an environmental risk. It comes out of nowhere and can just sever a critical artery in the system, messing up both supply and demand all at once.
But hey, it's not always something happening out there in the big wide world. Sometimes the problem is coming from inside the house. These are internal risks. This could be anything from a machine breaking down in your own factory floor to a glitch in your inventory software or, honestly, just bad planning. These are the risks that are kind of self-inflicted, you know? They come from a company's own rules and processes, or maybe the lack of them.
So, with all these potential disasters lurking around every corner, what are companies supposed to do? Well, they don't just sit around and hope for the best, the smart ones anyway. They actually have a proactive step-by-step process for getting out in front of these disruptions. Let's take a look at their playbook. So the whole idea behind professional risk management is this continuous four-step loop. It's actually based on a global standard, ISO 31000. It's pretty straightforward, really. First, you identify what could go wrong. Then you assess it. How likely is it and how bad would it be? Third, you treat it. What are we going to do about it? And finally, you monitor the whole thing to make sure your plan is actually working and to see what's changed.
That first step, identification, is really just a giant brainstorming session. A company will literally create something called a risk register. You can just think of it as a huge list of every single thing that could possibly mess things up. And they get super specific here. It's not just, what if there's a storm? It's, what if our key supplier is in a politically unstable region? Or, what's the chance of our cargo getting damaged on this specific shipping lane?
Okay, so once you have this massive list of potential problems, you realize pretty quickly you can't fix everything at once. It's just not possible. So you have to prioritize. And to do that, you ask two really simple questions for every single risk on that list. One, what are the odds of this actually happening? And two, if it does happen, how catastrophic is it going to be for our business? This is how you zero in on the threats that you absolutely have to deal with first.
All right, now it's time to actually do something. This is the treatment step, and it's all about making an action plan for those high-priority risks. This could mean a few different things. You might try to protect your supply chain, with better cybersecurity or physical security. You could develop a crisis management plan for how you'll respond when something bad happens. Or you could build backup plans to ensure continuity, like lining up a second or third supplier just in case, so you can keep the lights on no matter what.
But having a formal checklist is just one piece of the puzzle. The companies that are truly masters at this go way beyond that. They don't just manage risk, they build a whole culture of resilience that becomes part of their DNA.
The ultimate goal here is to create something called a supply chain security orientation. Now, that sounds like a fancy business term, but what it really means is getting the entire company obsessed with resilience. It's not one person's job or one department's problem. It's an attitude, a mindset that everyone shares, from the top-level executives all the way down to the person packing boxes in the warehouse. Everyone is thinking about how to keep the supply chain strong and ready for anything.
So how do you actually build that kind of culture? Well, it really comes down to three key things. First, you need solid processes. These are your rule books, like having strict quality checks for any new supplier you bring on. Second, you need the right technology. We're talking about tools that give you a real-time map of where all your stuff is at any given moment. And finally, and this is probably the most important one, you need the right people. You need a team of trained, experienced pros who know how to make the right call when things get chaotic.
And that really brings us to the big takeaway here. In the world we live in today, you just can't get rid of risk entirely. It's just not going to happen. So the real goal isn't to create a risk-proof system. The goal is to build a supply chain that's so resilient it can bend when it gets hit, but it never, ever breaks. That, right there, is the secret to survival in the modern world.